Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving into a play from the 17th century called Tryphon.
Ooh.
17th century English theater.
Okay.
You sent over a digitized copy of the original printed text,
Yeah.
which is really fascinating because it gives us a glimpse
Right.
into how plays were presented and perceived back then.
Yeah.
Even before we get to the story itself, I was just struck by how much information is packed into just the title page.
Okay.
We have the full title, of course, which is quite a mouthful.
Right.
But we also see who the actors were.
Yeah.
The Duke of York's servants, no less.
Oh, wow.
And even the name of the bookseller.
It's like a little time capsule.
Yeah, like a little time capsule.
Showing you exactly how these things were produced and put out into the world.
Right.
And, it really highlights that these were both artistic endeavors and commercial products.
Yeah.
These details weren't just for show.
Right.
They were advertising. And they tell us something about the play's intended audience.
Yeah.
The world it was entering into.
For sure.
All of that is coded in there.
But then we get to the prologue.
Yeah.
And things take a very interesting turn.
Okay.
The characters actually argue against having a prologue, even directly addressing the audience.
Interesting.
So it feels very meta, almost like they're winking at us across the centuries.
Right.
Why would the playwright, the Earl of Orrery, choose this approach?
That's a great question. And it gets to the heart of what heroic tragedy the genre Tryphon falls under was all about.
Okay.
These plays often dealt with grand themes like ambition, love, betrayal,
Right.
Much like a modern political drama or a soap opera.
I like that connection. Yeah.
But they also adhered to certain conventions. And the
Okay.
prologue was a standard element.
Right.
So by breaking this convention and having his characters kind of poke fun at it,
Mm-hmm.
Orrery might have been signaling that he was going to play with audience expectations in other ways, too.
Okay.
He's inviting us to question those grand themes and maybe even see the humor in the characters' dilemmas.
So it's not just a play.
Yeah.
It's a statement.
Exactly.
But before we get too deep into the play's message,
Yeah.
could you give us some background on the Earl of Orrery himself?
Sure.
Was he a rebel, a traditionalist, or somewhere in between?
The Earl of Orrery was a fascinating figure
Okay.
in the Restoration period. He was deeply involved in politics,
Okay.
even spending time in the Tower of London for his beliefs.
Wow.
And he was a patron of the arts.
Mm-hmm.
His plays were popular, often performed at court.
Okay.
Tryphon might not be his most famous work,
Mm-hmm.
but it fits perfectly into the trend of heroic tragedy
Okay.
with its larger-than-life characters,
Right.
heightened emotions, and explorations of power and morality.
So we have a playwright known for his dramatic flair,
Yes.
tackling big themes,
Mm-hmm.
and he's already signaled that he's not afraid to break the rules.
Exactly.
I'm hooked. Tell me more about the character.
Okay.
Who are we going to be spending time with in this deep dive?
Well, the play centers on Tryphon,
Okay.
who has just seized the Cyrene throne.
Right.
He's ambitious and ruthless,
Yeah.
but he also wants to be seen as a just ruler.
Okay. Interesting.
He seeks an alliance with Nicanor,
Mm-hmm.
a powerful general,
Yeah.
by offering to marry his daughter Cleopatra.
Oh, okay.
However, Tryphon is also incredibly fickle.
Oh, no. Is a love triangle on the horizon.
You got it.
Those never end well.
You're absolutely right.
Oh,
He becomes smitten with Nicanor's other daughter, Stratonice,
wow.
throwing everything into chaos.
Oh, my goodness.
And just to add fuel to the fire,
Okay.
Tryphon's loyal friend Demetrius is secretly in love with Stratonice,
Oh, wow.
while Cleopatra loves Aretas, who wants to overthrow Tryphon for both political and romantic reasons.
Oh, my goodness.
It's a tangled web of love, ambition, and duty.
Yeah.
And every character is pulled in multiple directions.
It sounds like everyone in this play is facing some serious dilemmas. How does Orrery explore those tensions between
Yeah.
personal desires and the demands of duty and ambition?
Well, one of the most striking things about Tryphon
Okay.
is how it portrays characters struggling to reconcile their private feelings with their public roles.
Right.
For example, Tryphon is constantly trying to justify his actions even to himself.
Okay.
There's a scene where he actually argues that
Right.
because the previous king was suspicious of him,
Okay.
it made his actions justified.
That's fascinating because it suggests that he's aware,
Right.
at least on some level, that what he's done is wrong.
Yeah,
But he's so consumed by ambition
exactly.
that he needs to rationalize his behavior.
Yeah, he can't even admit it to himself.
Do we see similar struggles with other characters?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Nicanor, for instance, is torn between his loyalty to his king and his love for his daughters.
Right.
He wants to serve his country, but he also wants to protect his family. Demetrius, as we've mentioned, faces a similar conflict.
Mm-hmm.
He's sworn an oath of friendship to Tryphon,
Yeah?
but he's also in love with the woman his friend desires.
Right.
It's this constant push and pull between what they feel they should do
Yeah.
and what they want to do.
You're right, and I think that's something we can all relate to, even centuries later.
Yeah.
We've all felt torn between
Right.
our obligations and our desires.
For sure.
What about the female characters?
Yeah.
You mentioned that Cleopatra and Stratonice are both caught up in this web of intrigue.
Mm-hmm.
Did they get to make their own choices?
That's a great question.
Or are they simply pawns in the game of power?
And it's one of the things that makes Tryphon so interesting to analyze.
Okay.
The women in this play are not just passive bystanders. They have their own agency,
Right.
and they use it.
Hmm.
Even though they're operating within the constraints of their society,
Right.
they still make choices that impact the plot,
Yeah.
and they speak their minds. For example, Stratonice delivers this really powerful speech where she challenges the notion that a crown given by a tyrant
Right.
can ever be a gift from heaven.
That's a powerful statement.
Yeah.
She's essentially saying that power gained through illegitimate means is inherently corrupt.
Right.
But we also know she's in love with Demetrius,
Yeah.
who is loyal to Tryphon.
Exactly.
How does that internal conflict play out for her?
Stratonice's struggle really gets to the heart of the play's central question.
Okay.
How much are we willing to compromise our personal happiness for
Right.
the sake of duty or social expectations?
Yeah.
She's forced to make some very difficult choices, and those choices have far-reaching consequences.
It sounds like we're just scratching the surface here.
Definitely.
So much is already happening in Tryphon.
Yeah.
And I'm eager to dive deeper into the plot and see how these characters navigate their complex situations.
For sure.
But before we move on, is there anything else about the play's context?
Yeah.
The world it was written in,
Mhm.
the audience it was intended for,
Right.
that we should keep in mind as we explore this story?
I think it's important to remember that Tryphon was written and performed during a time of great political and social upheaval
Okay.
in England.
Yeah.
The country had recently gone through a civil war,
Right.
and the monarchy had been restored.
Yeah.
People were grappling with questions of power, loyalty,
Right.
and the legitimacy of authority.
So the play wasn't just entertainment.
Yeah,
It was a reflection of the anxieties and debates of its time.
absolutely.
It makes you wonder how audiences back then would have responded to these characters and their dilemmas.
Right.
Were they rooting for Tryphon despite his ruthlessness,
Mm-hmm.
or were they hoping to see him fall?
It's hard to say for sure,
Yeah.
but I think the ambiguity of the characters,
Right.
the way they're both sympathetic and flawed,
Mhm.
would have resonated with audiences who were themselves grappling with these complex issues.
So much to unpack.
I know, right?
I can't wait to dive into the heart of the play with you
Yeah.
and see what unfolds.
Definitely.
For those listening, get ready for a wild ride
Oh, yeah.
full of intrigue, betrayal,
Mhm.
and maybe even some surprising moments of hope.
We'll be back soon to continue our deep dive into Tryphon. Welcome back to the deep dive. When we left off, you were just starting to get a sense of the complicated web
Yeah.
of relationships and conflicting loyalties
Right.
at play in Tryphon.
Mm-hmm.
We left off with Tryphon realizing he's fallen for Stratonice,
Right.
completely derailing his initial plan to marry her sister Cleopatra.
It's such a great example of how Orrery subverts our expectations.
Yeah.
We think we're getting a typical power marriage plot,
Right.
but then boom,
Yeah.
genuine feelings get in the way.
Right. Or at least what Tryphon believes to be genuine feelings.
Right, exactly.
And that's where things start to unravel for him.
Okay.
Remember, Tryphon is used to getting what he wants. He
Mhm.
sees the throne.
Right.
He's used to command. So when Stratonice rejects his advances, it's not just a blow to his ego.
Right.
It challenges his entire sense of control.
I can only imagine how that plays out,
Yeah.
given what we know about his ruthless ambition.
It isn't pretty.
Okay.
Tryphon turns to her father, Nicanor,
Mm-hmm.
and essentially gives him an ultimatum.
Oh, wow.
Persuades Stratonice to marry him
Okay.
or face the consequences.
So Nicanor is now caught between a tyrant
Yeah,
and his daughter's happiness.
exactly.
What a terrible position to be in.
I know.
It reminds me of something you mentioned earlier about the play reflecting the political anxieties of its time.
Yeah.
Would audiences back then have seen this as a parallel
Mm-hmm.
to the power struggles happening in their own world?
It's certainly possible.
Yeah.
Remember, England had just gone through a period of intense conflict and change.
Right.
The idea of a ruler demanding obedience, even threatening those closest to them,
Right.
would not have been unfamiliar.
And this is where we see the true strength of Tritonis' character.
Yes,
She refuses to be a pawn in this power play.
she absolutely does.
Yeah.
Instead of giving in to her father's pleas or Tryphon's threats,
Right.
she chooses to reveal her love for Demetrius. Wow. Imagine the audacity of that.
Yeah.
In a society where women's choices were so limited.
Right.
She's essentially declaring her own autonomy,
Yeah.
her right to love whom she chooses,
Mhm.
even if it means defying the most powerful man in the land.
It's a powerful moment.
Yes.
And I'm sure the audience would have been on the edge of their seats,
Oh, yeah.
wondering what would happen next.
Right.
So how does Tryphon react to this public declaration of love?
For his rival.
Yeah.
As you can imagine, he doesn't take it well.
Right.
He flies into a rage.
Okay.
But at the same time, it seems to pique his curiosity.
Oh,
He becomes obsessed with uncovering the identity of his rival,
okay.
suspecting it's someone close to him. But remember, he's still completely unaware of Demetrius's true feelings.
Oh, the irony.
Right.
It seems like everyone in this play is operating on incomplete information,
Yes.
which just leads to more misunderstandings and conflict.
Exactly.
But what about Cleopatra?
Yeah.
She's been left at the altar, so to speak.
Right.
How does she react to Tryphon's betrayal?
Cleopatra is a fascinating character.
Okay.
In her own right.
Yeah.
She's not just a heartbroken woman.
Okay.
She's also ambitious and politically savvy.
Right.
She sees Tryphon's rejection as both a personal insult and a political opportunity.
So she's not just going to sit back and cry about it.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
She aligns herself with Seleucus,
Mhm.
a character who has been harboring his own feelings for her.
Right.
He sees a chance to win Cleopatra's favor
Okay.
and at the same time take revenge on Tryphon.
Okay, so now we have multiple characters plotting against Tryphon.
Yes.
We have Eurydice, who's in love with Cleopatra
Right.
and wants to see a just ruler on the throne.
Yeah.
We have Cleopatra herself, who's driven by both wounded pride
Mm-hmm.
and political ambition.
Right.
And we have Seleucus,
Yeah.
who's motivated by a combination of love and revenge.
Exactly.
What a recipe for chaos.
And this is where the play's structure really starts to pay off.
Like
All
that.
these separate storylines, these individual motivations
Right.
start to converge.
Okay.
Seleucus approaches Eurydice
Mm-hmm.
and proposes they join forces.
Okay.
But remember, Eurydice is still bound by his oath to Demetrius,
Right.
who ironically is still trying to help Tryphon win over Stratonice.
It's like a tangled web, each thread pulling in a different direction.
Yeah,
It's hard to see how anyone can come out of this unscathed.
it's a mess.
So, what happens next?
Well-
Does Eurydice betray his friend or his love?
That is precisely the question that hangs over the rest of the play.
Yeah.
Eurydice is truly torn.
Mm-hmm.
He wants to free his country from a tyrant.
Right.
He wants to be with Cleopatra,
Yeah.
but he's given his word. It's a powerful example of how personal honor can clash with larger societal needs.
And it really underscores that central theme we talked about earlier.
Right.
The tension between what we want
Yes.
and what we believe we should do.
Exactly.
So does Eurydice ultimately make a choice?
He does.
Does he pick a side?
But it's not a simple, clean-cut decision.
Okay.
He agrees to help Seleucus,
Mm-hmm.
but insists on delaying any action for one day.
Oh, wow.
He wants to give Demetrius a chance to plead Tryphon's case to Stratonice,
Okay.
hoping that maybe, just maybe, love will conquer all
Right.
and resolve the situation peacefully.
It's a sliver of hope in a very dark situation.
Yeah.
But with so many secrets and so much at stake,
Mm-hmm.
I can't help but feel like this is the calm before the storm.
Right.
I have a feeling that when we come back,
Yeah.
for the final part of our deep dive into Tryphon,
Mm-hmm.
things are really going to come to a head. Welcome back to the deep dive.
Yeah.
Feels like we've been through so much with these characters already.
It's been quite a journey.
But, things in Tryphon rarely go smoothly.
Right.
Last we left off, Eurydice had agreed to help overthrow Tryphon,
Mm-hmm.
but only after giving Demetrius one last day
Yeah.
to try and win over Stratonice. Talk about a ticking clock.
And remember, Demetrius is completely oblivious
Oh, yeah.
to the fact that his best friend is also his rival
Right.
for Stratonice's affections. He's walking into a very dangerous situation,
Right.
driven by a sense of loyalty that tragically is misplaced.
It's almost heartbreaking.
Right.
He's so sincere, so determined to do what he believes is right.
Yeah.
Knowing what we know, it's hard not to feel a sense of dread for what's coming.
It really is.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that makes Tryphon so compelling. It's not a simple story of good versus evil.
Right?
These are complex characters
Yeah.
making difficult choices, often with incomplete information.
Right.
And sometimes even the best intentions can lead to disastrous consequences.
So how does this all play out? Does Demetrius succeed in convincing Stratonus to marry Tryphon?
He tries,
Okay.
but it's a hopeless task.
Right.
Stratonus is in love with Demetrius, and she's also acutely aware of Tryphon's tyrannical nature.
Right.
She's caught between her love for Demetrius and her fear for her father's safety.
So she's trapped.
Exactly.
Just as Demetrius is trapped by his oath.
Right.
And Nicanor is trapped between his loyalty to his king and his love for his daughter.
It seems like there's no way out.
It's like the walls are closing in on everyone.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And as the tension mounts, we see another side of Tryphon.
Okay.
He's not just a power-hungry tyrant.
Okay.
He's also capable of genuine, albeit twisted affection.
Okay.
He pleads with Nicanor to persuade Stratonus to marry him, arguing that he truly loves her.
Is it real love, though? Or is it more about possession? About controlling the one thing he can't seem to conquer?
That's a question the play leaves open for us to ponder. Is Tryphon capable of genuine love?
Right.
Or is his desire for Stratonus just another manifestation of his ambition?
It's a fascinating dilemma.
It really is.
So what happens next? Does this final plea work? Does Stratonice give in?
No, she doesn't.
Okay.
And that's when everything really starts to fall apart. Seleucus, impatient with Eresus's delay, decides to take matters into his own hands.
Okay.
He approaches Demetrius and reveals Tryphon's betrayal, exposing his true intentions and his obsession with Stratonus.
I bet that didn't go over well.
You're right. Demetrius is devastated.
Yeah.
He feels betrayed by his friend, by his king, by everything he's believed in. And most importantly, he realizes the impossible situation he's been put in.
Yeah.
His oath binds him to Tryphon.
Right.
But fulfilling that oath would mean sacrificing his own love and condemning the woman he loves to a life of misery.
It's a tragic realization.
It is.
And it leads to a truly heartbreaking moment.
Yeah.
Unable to reconcile his conflicting loyalties and overwhelmed by grief and despair, Demetrius takes his own life.
It's a shocking and tragic end
Right.
for a character who embodied loyalty and honor.
Right.
His death is a powerful indictment of the play's world, a world where personal integrity is often sacrificed at the altar of power and ambition.
So with Demetrius gone, what happens to the rebellion? Does Aretas finally break free from his oath and join forces with Seleucus?
He does. With his oath fulfilled, albeit in the most tragic way possible,
Right.
Aretas is free to act.
Okay.
She joins forces with Seleucus, and they lead an uprising against Tryphon.
Okay.
But just when it seems like justice will prevail,
No.
Tryphon reveals another devastating truth.
Oh, no.
Stratonus, unable to bear the weight of her father's impending execution and the grief over Demetrius' death, has taken her own life.
Oh, wow. This is also tragic.
It is.
It seems like the cycle of betrayal and revenge has consumed everyone. Is there any hope left in this play? Does anyone escape this cycle of violence and despair?
That's the truly devastating part. Tryphon, finally realizing the full extent of the devastation he has caused, is overcome with guilt and remorse. He takes his own life, ending the reign of terror he unleashed.
So Tryphon ends not with a bang, but with a whimper.
Yeah.
It's a bleak and powerful reminder of the costs of ambition, the fragility of human relationships,
Right.
and the destructive nature of power unchecked.
It's a lot to take in.
Yeah.
And I think you've done a great job of guiding us through this complex and challenging play.
Well, thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our listener before we wrap up this deep dive?
I think the most important takeaway from Tryphon, despite its tragic ending, is the importance of questioning assumptions and challenging the status quo.
Okay.
The characters in this play were often blinded by their own ambitions or bound by oaths that ultimately led to their downfall. It's a reminder that we should always strive to be aware of the forces that shape our decisions.
Yeah.
And to be willing to question the rules and expectations that govern our lives.
Right.
Even when it's uncomfortable to do so.
That's a powerful message and one that resonates deeply with me. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today.
You're welcome.
And for our listener, If this deep dive has sparked your curiosity, I highly encourage you to seek out the full text of Tryphon. It's a challenging read,
Yeah,
but it's also a rewarding one,
for sure.
full of moments of beauty, heartbreak, and profound insight into the human condition. Until next time, keep diving deep.